I took the school bus job because no one else wanted it. That should have been my first warning. Rural Minnesota doesn't advertise its loneliness, but it wears it like a second skin. Endless pine forests, frozen lakes that never fully thaw in people's memories, roads that stretch straight for miles and then vanish without explanation. I'd lived here most of my life, worked odd jobs, driven trucks, plowed snow, delivered groceries. Driving didn't scare me. Silence didn't scare me either. What scared me was being broke. So when the district office called and asked if I could start immediately, no interview, no background check beyond the basics, I said yes before they finished the sentence. They told me the route number was 61B. I asked where it ran. There was a pause on the line, long enough that I checked my phone signal. "You'll get the rules in the bus," the woman finally said. Her voice was flat, practiced. "Follow them exactly." That was the second warning. The bus waited for me in the far corner of the depot, away from the other vehicles. Yellow paint dulled by age. The number 61B stenciled on the side in black, slightly crooked, like it had been added later. No driver's name on the placard. No route map taped behind the seat like the others. On the driver's seat lay a single envelope. My name was written on it in block letters, not printed. Written. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. Rules for Route 61B1. Do not start the engine before 6:10 a.m., even if the bus is already running when you arrive. 2. Do not count the children. 3. If a child asks you to stop where there is no stop sign, you must stop. 4. Never look at the children through the overhead mirror after 6:47 a.m. 5. If you hear singing, turn the radio up until you can no longer hear it. 6. If a child is still on the bus when you reach the final stop, do not speak to them. Open the doors and wait. At the bottom, someone had added a line in pen. If you make it to Friday, you can ask questions. I laughed. A short, nervous sound that echoed too loud in the empty bus. Someone was messing with me. Old-timers had a cruel sense of humor. I crumpled the paper, then smoothed it back out. The ink was real. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges, creased like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times. I checked the clock, 6:09 a.m. The engine was off. Dead quiet. My breath fogged the windshield. At exactly 6:10, the bus shuddered. The engine turned over by itself. I froze, keys still in my hand. The radio clicked on. Static hissed, then a low murmur of voices too soft to understand. I turned the dial, heart pounding, until it landed on a local station playing weather updates and farm reports. My hands shook as I slid the crumpled rules into my jacket pocket. Fine, I told myself. Fine. I'd play along. The route started normal enough. Gravel roads, snowbanks piled high on either side. One farmhouse every few miles, smoke curling from chimneys. The first stop sign appeared at the edge of a dirt driveway, half buried in snow. A child stood waiting. He wore a thick coat, hood pulled low, backpack hanging off one shoulder. When he climbed aboard, he didn't look at me, just scanned his card and walked down the aisle. I almost counted him. The rule burned in my mind. Do not count the children. More stops followed. More kids. Some waved, some stared straight ahead. None of them spoke. The bus felt colder with every stop, despite the heater blasting hot air at my feet. By the time we turned off the main road and onto a narrow forest path I didn't recognize, my stomach was tight with dread. This road wasn't on any map I knew. No houses, no mailboxes, just trees pressing in close, branches clawing at the sides of the bus. At one point, I glanced in the rearview mirror by accident. Every seat was full. That wasn't possible. The bus wasn't rated for this many kids. They were packed shoulder to shoulder, faces pale, eyes dark. Some looked too old to be in school, some too young. One in the back row didn't look like a child at all, but I snapped my eyes forward before I could be sure. My dashboard clock ticked over. 6:47 a.m. I didn't look up again. The road twisted sharply and opened into a clearing where a stop sign stood alone, red paint fresh against the snow. No building, no driveway, just the sign. A girl stood there. She raised her hand as I slowed, palm facing me. When the doors hissed open, she climbed aboard and leaned close to the driver's seat. "Can you stop next time by the lake?" she asked softly. "There isn't a stop there," I replied automatically, then remembered Rule 3. My mouth went dry. "Yes," I said, "of course." She smiled. Her teeth were too many. She walked down the aisle, and as she passed the other kids, they leaned away from her like she smelled wrong. The radio crackled. A child's voice began to sing. It wasn't loud, just a thin melody drifting from somewhere behind me. A lullaby my grandmother used to hum when storms knocked out the power. My hands flew to the radio dial. I cranked the volume up until the farm report blared through the speakers, until my ears rang and my eyes watered. Still, I thought I could hear the singing beneath it. The next stop wasn't marked. No sign, no clearing, just a frozen lake stretching out like a sheet of cracked glass. A dozen hands rose at once. I stopped. The doors opened. Children poured out onto the ice, boots crunching softly. None of them slipped. None of them looked back. They walked toward the center of the lake, where a dark patch pulsed slowly, like something breathing beneath the surface. I did not watch them for long. When the doors closed, the bus felt lighter, but not empty. I drove the rest of the route in a daze, following turns I didn't remember making, roads that seemed to fold back on themselves. When the final stop came, it was in front of a school I'd never seen before. Brick building. No sign. Windows dark. Most of the children filed out silently. One remained. I could feel them behind me. Rule 6 pressed against my ribs like a hand. I opened the doors. Cold air flooded in. Snow drifted across the steps. I waited. After a long moment, small footsteps moved past my seat and down the stairs. The doors closed on their own. I sat there long after the bus was empty, engine idling, breath shaking. When I finally checked the time, it was still 6:10 a.m. The clock had not moved. That evening, I found the rules paper back on the driver's seat, uncrumpled. A new line had been added at the bottom. You did well today. Tomorrow will test you. I didn't sleep that night, and when morning came, the bus was already running. I told myself I wouldn't go back. That was the lie I repeated while pulling on my boots, while brushing my teeth, while standing in my kitchen staring at the frost crawling up the inside of the window like white veins. Outside, the world was still dark. The kind of dark that doesn't belong to night, but to something older, heavier. My phone said it was 5:42 a.m. The bus depot didn't open until 6. Yet when I stepped outside, I could already hear it. The low, familiar rumble of a diesel engine. It was waiting. I drove there on autopilot, hands tight on the steering wheel. Every mile marker felt wrong, like it had shifted overnight. When I pulled into the depot, the lights were off. All the other buses sat silent and dead, coated in frost, except 61B. Its headlights were on. The engine was running. I stayed in my car for a full minute, breath fogging the windshield, pulse pounding in my ears. Rule 1 echoed in my head, twisted now. Do not start the engine before 6:10 a.m. It didn't say anything about stopping it. I considered turning around, driving until the road ended, calling the district, calling anyone, but my phone had no signal. When I opened the bus door, the warmth hit me first, then the smell. Not diesel, not oil, wet earth, old leaves, something like a thawed grave. The envelope was on the seat again. Same paper, same handwriting, rules for Route 61B updated. 1. The engine will start on its own. Do not interfere. 2. Do not count the children, not before, not after. 3. If a child asks you a question, answer honestly but briefly. 4. After 6:47 a.m., the overhead mirror does not show what is behind you. 5. If the children begin to sing in unison, stop the bus immediately. 6. If someone who is not a child boards the bus, do not acknowledge them. 7. If you miss a stop, do not turn around. My hands trembled as I folded the paper. Someone had underlined the last rule hard enough to tear the page. The clock clicked to 6:10 a.m. The bus lurched forward. The first child boarded without a sound. Then another, then more. Their boots left no snow on the floor. Their coats were always dry, no matter how hard it was snowing outside. I focused on the road. The radio came on by itself again, tuned to a station I didn't recognize. The voice on it spoke slowly, listing school announcements for names I'd never heard. At the third stop, a boy climbed aboard and met my eyes. He did not blink, not once. Morning, I said, forcing my voice steady. Is today the day? He asked. I swallowed. Rule 3. I don't know, I answered. His lips twitched like he was suppressing a smile, and he walked past me. As he took his seat, I caught my reflection in the side mirror. My eyes looked sunken, older. At 6:47 a.m. exactly, the radio cut out. Silence filled the bus, thick and buzzing. I did not look at the overhead mirror. I didn't need to. I could feel eyes on the back of my neck. Dozens of them. Maybe more. The road shifted again. Trees leaning closer, branches tapping the windows in a slow, deliberate rhythm. That's when the singing started. Not one voice, many, soft at first, a humming vibration that made my teeth ache. Then words formed, stretched and warped, sung in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. They were counting. I slammed the brakes. The bus screeched to a halt on a stretch of road that shouldn't exist. No snow, just dirt, black and wet, steaming faintly in the cold air. The singing stopped. Every child turned their head at the same time. They stared at me, not angry, expectant. One by one, they stood and filed toward the door. As it opened, I realized there was no forest outside anymore. There was a field, endless, gray and flat, dotted with crooked wooden posts that might have once been fence markers or grave signs. The children walked into it calmly, dissolving into mist as they went farther out. The last to leave was the boy who didn't blink. He paused at the steps. "You stopped in time," he said. "They won't subtract you." "Subtract me from what?" I asked. He tilted his head. "From the count," he replied and stepped off the bus. The doors closed. The road was back. I drove on, hands numb, mind unraveling. The bus felt wrong again. Too heavy, too full. At the next stop, someone new boarded. They were tall, too tall to be a student. Their head brushed the ceiling as they stepped inside. They wore a long coat, dark and soaked, water dripping onto the floor but never pooling. Their face was hidden beneath a hood. Rule 6 screamed in my skull. Do not acknowledge them. They didn't scan a card, didn't sit. They stood directly behind my seat. I focused on the windshield, heart hammering. "You're doing better than the last one," the voice said. Not loud, not soft, close. I said nothing. "They broke Rule 7, it continued. Turned around, tried to fix a mistake." The bus shuddered as if remembering. "Do you know what happens when you turn around on this route?" I shook my head once before I could stop myself. "A mistake." The thing laughed quietly. "Exactly." It moved away. I felt the pressure lift as it walked down the aisle and disappeared somewhere behind me. I did not look. I would not look. When the final stop came, the school was different. The building sagged, bricks cracked, windows boarded up. The doors creaked open anyway. Children poured out faster this time, almost eager. One stayed behind. Small, too small. I opened the doors and waited. They stood at the top of the steps, looking up at me with eyes far too old for their face. "Will you still be here tomorrow?" they asked. I didn't answer. The child frowned, then stepped down into the snow and vanished between one blink and the next. When the doors closed, the bus went quiet. The clock moved. 6:11 a.m. I drove back to the depot in a fog, barely registering the familiar buildings, the real roads. When I shut off the engine, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit there and breathe. On the seat lay the rules. A fresh line of ink glistened at the bottom. "You are now part of the route. Do not be late tomorrow." That night, I dreamed of numbers carved into ice, of children counting backward as they sank beneath a frozen lake. When I woke up, my boots were wet, and there was mud on my kitchen floor, leading away from the door. By the third morning, I stopped pretending this was temporary. The bus was no longer just something I drove. It was something that expected me. I felt it the moment I opened my eyes, a pressure in my chest like a hand resting there, patient and sure. My alarm never went off, yet I woke at the exact same time as the previous days, 5:41 a.m., 1 minute earlier than yesterday. I lay there listening to the house creak, listening for footsteps that didn't belong to me. The mud on the kitchen floor was gone, but the smell remained. Wet earth, rotting leaves, winter disturbed. When I stepped outside, my driveway was already plowed. I hadn't hired anyone. The snow was piled neatly on either side, too neat, like it had been shaped instead of pushed. The bus engine was audible even from my porch. It wasn't waiting at the depot this time. It was parked at the end of my street. Headlights on, door closed. I stood frozen in the cold, heart pounding so hard it hurt. For one wild moment, I considered walking the other way, just disappearing into the woods. But I knew deep down that the woods would only bend and fold until they brought me right back. The door opened with a hiss. I climbed aboard. The envelope sat on the driver's seat, thicker than before. Rules for Route 61B Revision 3. 1. You belong to the bus during operating hours. 2. Do not attempt to change the route. It will notice. 3. Children may forget their names. You must not remind them. 4. If a stop appears that you do not recognize, you must still stop. 5. If the bus asks you a question, answer. 6. Do not read the rules aloud. My throat tightened at rule 5. The bus asks you a question. I folded the paper with care and placed it in my pocket. As soon as I sat down, the doors closed and the engine revved like a satisfied animal. We rolled forward on our own. The first few stops were familiar now, in the way a nightmare becomes familiar after repeating enough times. The same children boarded, the quiet ones, the ones who never blinked. The girl with too many teeth sat near the back, her hands folded neatly in her lap, humming without sound. I did not count them. I didn't need to. I could feel when the number was wrong. At 6:03 a.m., a new stop appeared. There was no sign, no clearing, just a single wooden post sticking out of the snow, crooked and splintered, with something carved into it. A name, or what was left of one. The letters were shallow, worn smooth by time and weather. I couldn't read it clearly, but as the bus slowed, a sharp pain shot through my head, and suddenly I knew the name anyway. It was mine. The doors opened before I touched the lever. A boy stood there, alone. He looked about 10 years old, cheeks red from the cold, backpack dragging in the snow behind him. When he stepped onto the bus, the pain in my head vanished. "Good morning," he said cheerfully. I hesitated. Rule 3. Children may forget their names. You must not remind them. "Morning," I replied. He scanned his card. The machine beeped, then displayed a blank screen. "That's funny," he said. "It usually shows my name." I said nothing. He frowned, thinking hard, then shrugged and walked down the aisle. As he passed the other kids, they watched him closely, eyes following his every step. No one moved aside. He squeezed into a seat that didn't seem to exist a moment earlier. The wooden post disappeared in the mirror. The bus felt heavier. The road narrowed, snow giving way to dark slush. The forest leaned in closer, branches pressing against the windows like fingers testing glass. At 6:17 a.m., the boy raised his hand. "Driver?" he asked. "Yes?" I answered before I could stop myself. He smiled, relieved. "Do you know my name?" My heart dropped into my stomach. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "I don't." His smile faltered. Confusion crossed his face, followed by something darker, fear. "That's okay," he said too quickly. "I'll remember it later." He did not raise his hand again. At 6:47 a.m., the world tilted. That was the only way I could describe it. The road didn't change, but my perception did, like a layer had been peeled away. The air inside the bus grew thick and damp. The windows fogged, though the heater was still blasting. The bus spoke, not with words at first, with vibrations, a low rumble that traveled up through the seat and into my bones. "Are you afraid?" it asked. The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't even sound. It was a thought that wasn't mine. "Yes," I answered. The bus seemed pleased. "You should be. Fear keeps you facing forward." My hands clenched the wheel. "What do you want from me?" A pause. "Then we already have you." The singing began again. This time it wasn't counting. It was names. Softly spoken, half sung, passed from child to child like a secret. Names of kids who had gotten off at strange stops. Names that felt heavy, important. Names that were being worn down. The boy in the middle seat pressed his hands over his ears. "Stop," he whispered. "Please stop saying it." No one listened. The next stop appeared suddenly, right in the middle of the road. A small building stood there, crooked and sagging, its windows black. A hand-painted sign hung over the door. "Attendance." The bus stopped on its own. The doors opened. Every child stood at once. They filed out in perfect order, feet crunching softly on the frozen ground. The boy hesitated, looking back at me. "I think I forgot something," he said. I met his eyes. "I think you did too," I replied. He nodded slowly and stepped off the bus. Inside the building, I saw rows of desks. No teacher. Just a chalkboard covered in names that crossed out again and again until they were nothing but smudges. The children sat. The door closed. The bus pulled away. The silence afterward was worse than the singing. I drove the rest of the route alone. No humming, no whispers, just the sound of the engine and my own breathing. When the final stop came, there was no school, no building at all, just an empty lot covered in snow. The bus stopped anyway. The doors opened. Cold air rushed in. Nothing happened. I waited. After a long moment, the bus asked, "Will you forget too?" "I won't," I said. "I write things down." A vibration like a laugh ran through the frame. "Writing fades," it said. "Names fade. Drivers fade." "Then why keep me?" I asked. "Because you remember longer than most." The doors closed. The bus turned around. I froze. Rule 7 from the old list screamed in my memory, but the bus ignored it, swinging smoothly back the way we'd come. When we passed the wooden post again, the carving was different. My name was still there, but it was thinner, missing letters. That afternoon when I got home, my neighbor waved at me from across the yard. "Hey," he called. "Sorry, what was your name again?" I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. Losing your name doesn't feel like forgetting a word. It feels like a hollow opening up inside you, quiet and patient, waiting to be filled by something else. I stood in my driveway staring at my neighbor, mouth open, panic clawing up my throat. I knew who I was. I knew my memories, my childhood, my work, the way my mother used to hum while cooking. But the sound that should have represented all of that refused to come. My neighbor laughed awkwardly. "Sorry. Long day," he said, already turning away, the moment slipping from his mind as easily as it slipped from mine. I went inside and locked the door. That night I wrote my name over and over in a notebook, page after page until my hand cramped. The letters looked wrong, too sharp, too thin, like they belonged to someone else. By the time I went to bed, the ink had begun to smear on its own, bleeding into the paper until the pages looked damp. At 5:40 a.m., the bus honked outside my house. Not once, 3 times, impatient. I didn't check the time. I didn't check the rules. I knew better now. The bus decided when things happened. My job was to obey. The envelope was already on the seat when I climbed aboard, heavier than ever. The paper inside felt warm. Rules for Route 61B Final Edition 1. You will no longer be addressed by name. 2. Do not attempt to give yourself a new one. 3. Familiar faces may forget you. This is normal. 4. If a child calls you by a name, do not respond. 5. There is one rule you were never given. 6. You will learn it today. My stomach dropped. The engine growled, and the bus pulled away from my house, tires crunching over the edge of my own driveway like it no longer belonged to me. The first child boarded at the usual stop. He paused when he saw me, head tilting slightly. "You look different," he said. I said nothing. He shrugged and walked past, but I could feel his eyes on me long after he sat down. More children boarded, fewer than before. The bus felt emptier, yet heavier, like the air itself had weight. The girl with too many teeth was gone. So was the boy who never blinked. Something worse had taken their places. At 6:12 a.m., a child climbed aboard who was wearing my jacket. My jacket. Same worn sleeves, same tear near the pocket. Even the faint stain from spilled coffee I never managed to wash out. The child was my height, my build. When they turned, I saw my face looking back at me from under the hood. Younger, smoother, smiling. "Morning," it said, using my voice perfectly. My hand slipped on the steering wheel. Rule 6 throbbed in my head. If someone who is not a child boards the bus, do not acknowledge them. But this thing took a seat in the front row, close enough that I could see the way its smile never reached the eyes. The bus rolled on. At 6:47 a.m., the mirrors changed. I knew they would. I didn't look at the overhead mirror, but the side mirrors were enough. The reflection of the road warped, stretching unnaturally, and the trees leaned inward, their branches knitting together overhead. The bus spoke again. "You are close to understanding," it said. "Understanding what?" I asked. The child wearing my face chuckled softly. "That you're replaceable," it said, "just like the rest of us." The singing started, low and unified, vibrating through the floor. Not names this time, not numbers. Rules. Spoken aloud, softly, lovingly, as if recited from memory. Rules that hadn't been written down. Do not look back. Do not ask why. Do not take them home. Do not let them off alone. My heart slammed against my ribs. Do not take them home. The bus slowed. Ahead I saw my street. My house. The bus pulled over in front of it. The doors opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of my kitchen. Coffee, paper, ink. The child with my face stood up. "This is my stop," it said, stepping into the aisle. Every instinct screamed at me to stop it, to grab it, to do something. Rule 7 from the old list whispered like a dying breath. If you miss a stop, do not turn around. This wasn't missing a stop. This was letting something off. The bus asked its question. "Will you correct the route?" My throat burned. "If I don't?" "Then it stays," the bus replied, "and you leave." The thing smiled wider, teeth clicking softly together. I made my choice. I stayed still. The child stepped off the bus and walked up to my front door. It didn't knock. It didn't need to. The door opened for it. The moment it crossed the threshold, a sharp pain tore through my chest, like something being pulled free. The bus doors slammed shut. The engine roared. We drove away. The rest of the route passed in a blur. Fewer stops, fewer children, each one quieter than the last, their outlines slightly wrong, like unfinished sketches. None of them looked at me. When we reached the final stop, it wasn't the strange school or the empty lot. It was the depot. Normal, bright, full of yellow buses warming up for their routes. The bus rolled into its old spot and shut itself off. Silence. The envelope lay on the seat, thinner now. Inside was a single line. You learned the rule. Do not let replacements go unclaimed. I stepped off the bus, legs shaking. No one noticed me. Drivers passed by without a glance. A supervisor walked straight through me like I was a shadow. When I tried to speak, no sound came out. Across the lot I saw myself, or what wore my life now, laughing with another driver, holding a coffee mug I recognized, moving easily, naturally, like it had always belonged there. It turned its head. For a brief moment our eyes met. It raised its cup in a small, mocking salute. The bus engine behind me coughed once. I didn't turn around. I already knew what waited inside. The route wasn't finished. It had simply changed drivers. I didn't disappear. That was the cruelest part. I still existed, still thought, still felt the cold bite of Minnesota air against skin that no longer seemed entirely solid. But the world had adjusted around me, sliding into a version where I no longer fit cleanly into any space. I tried to follow the thing wearing my life. It was easy at first. It walked with my familiar stride, nodded to people I once knew, laughed at jokes I would have laughed at. When it spoke, my voice came out of its mouth, confident and warm. People leaned toward it, listened. No one looked at me. When I reached out and touched a passing bus, my hand passed through the metal like fog through a fence. No resistance, no sound. Behind me, engine noise rumbled. 61B, I turned slowly. The bus was no longer parked. It idled at the edge of the lot, angled toward the road, door open, waiting. Its interior lights glowed faintly, like eyes adjusting to darkness. The bus spoke without sound. You are late. I'm not the driver anymore, I said. My voice sounded wrong, thin and stretched, like it was echoing from far away. You are still assigned. The doors hissed wider. I didn't climb aboard. I walked alongside it instead. The bus rolled forward, slow enough to match my pace. Snow didn't crunch under my feet. I left no footprints. The bus tires did, deep and real, carving lines into the road. We moved through town together like that. Me on the shoulder, the bus in the lane. Neither of us acknowledged by anyone else. Cars passed without slowing. Headlights cut through me and kept going. At the first stop, children appeared as they always had. They did not board. They stepped off the curb and walked toward me. Up close, I could see what riding the bus had done to them. Their edges were blurred, their shadows lagging half a second behind their movements. Their eyes reflected light wrong, like animal eyes caught in headlights. One girl looked up at me. You forgot your seat, she said. I don't have one anymore, I replied. She frowned. Everyone has a seat. The bus doors opened. The children boarded without looking at me again. The bus rolled on. I followed. At 6:10 a.m., the road changed. The paved surface thinned, cracking into long black seams that pulsed faintly like veins. Trees leaned inward, their branches knitting overhead, forming a tunnel of wood and shadow. The bus slowed. I did not. For the first time, I moved ahead of it. The bus didn't like that. Its engine revved sharply, sound warping, stretching low and animal. The radio burst to life, static screaming until it resolved into a familiar voice. Mine. You're going the wrong way, it said calmly. I stopped. The bus crept closer until its grill was inches from my chest. I could feel vibration now, pressure, like standing too close to heavy machinery. You must stay with the route, it said. You help guide what cannot see. What happens if I don't? I asked. The bus fell silent. Then, softly, we drift. The next stop wasn't marked by a sign. It was marked by people. Dozens of them stood in the snow, staring at the approaching bus. Adults, elderly, teenagers, faces pale and blank, eyes hollow with the same emptiness I felt spreading through myself. They all turned toward me at once. Recognition flickered across their faces. You drove, one of them whispered. I did, I said. You didn't stop, another said. I did, I replied, though doubt crept in. A woman stepped closer, her breath fogged, though the air around her didn't move. My son was still on the bus, she said. You opened the doors, but he didn't come out. The bus doors opened behind me. No children exited, only silence. The woman looked past me, eyes filling with something that wasn't quite grief. Where did they go? She asked. I looked back at the bus. It didn't answer. I don't know, I said. That was the truth. The people stepped aside. The bus rolled forward. I followed again, shoulders heavy with something that felt like weight at last. At 6:47 a.m., I felt it before I heard it. The singing, not from inside the bus, from me. My mouth moved without my permission, humming the tune my grandmother used to sing, the one I'd heard on my first day. The sound vibrated outward and the trees leaned closer, listening. The bus shuddered. Stop, it commanded. I can't, I said, voice splitting into harmony with itself. I remember. Memory is contamination, the bus replied. It bends the path. Ahead, the frozen lake came into view. Cracked ice, dark water pulsing beneath the surface. The bus slowed. Hands pressed against the windows from inside, palms leaving no marks. They're still there, I whispered. They are balanced, the bus said. On what? On forgetting. I stepped in front of the bus. For the first time, it braked hard. Tires screaming. Snow sprayed around us, real and solid. If you block the route, it warned, you will be reassigned. Reassigned where? I asked. The lake cracked. A long, jagged line split the ice from shore to center, black water heaving beneath. The bus said nothing. Behind me, the singing grew louder, not just from me now, from beneath the ice. Names rose with the sound, names I had heard before, names crossed out on a chalkboard, names that no longer belonged to anyone. The bus inched forward. I stood my ground. For the first time since this began, it hesitated. And in that hesitation, I understood. The bus didn't choose drivers. It needed witnesses. And witnesses, unlike drivers, could walk away. The engine roared. The bus surged sideways, tires skidding, narrowly missing me as it veered back onto the road. It straightened, accelerated, and disappeared into the forest tunnel, taking the singing with it. The silence afterward was absolute. I stood alone by the lake, breath ragged, watching the ice slowly knit itself back together. In the distance, a horn sounded. School morning traffic. Normal buses, normal routes. I was still there, still unseen, but no longer pulled. As I turned away from the lake, I noticed something carved into the snow at my feet. Not my name, a route number, 61B. And beneath it, a question written in deep, deliberate lines. Who watches now? I stayed by the lake until the sun climbed high enough to turn the snow into blinding white. Nothing came for me. No bus, no voice in my head, no humming beneath the ice. That frightened me more than anything else had, because silence, I had learned, was not absence. It was attention held back. I walked. At first, I didn't know where I was going. The road curved away from the lake, thin and gray, bordered by trees that no longer leaned inward. They stood straight now, ordinary, heavy with snow. Birds flitted between branches. A car passed once, its driver staring straight ahead, radio playing something cheerful. The world had resumed. I hadn't. By the time I reached town, the school day was already in full swing. Children poured from buses that looked painfully normal, laughing, shoving, complaining about homework. I stood on the sidewalk as they passed through me like mist, their warmth brushing against something inside me that still ached to be solid. A yellow bus idled nearby. Not 61B. Its paint was bright, its windows clear. Its driver, a tired-looking man with a thermos, rubbed his eyes and checked his watch. I felt something tug in my chest, not pulling, inviting. I stepped closer. The door opened and a small boy climbed down, tripping on the last step. He laughed, picked himself up, and ran toward the school without looking back. The bus door closed. The engine revved. For a split second, I thought I heard it. A hum, low, familiar. The bus drove away. The tug faded. I wandered for days after that. Time moved strangely for me now. Sometimes the sun would rise and set without me noticing. Other times a single hour would stretch thin as ice beneath too much weight. I didn't need to eat, didn't sleep, though I dreamed anyway. Memories were playing without permission, looping like worn tape. People forgot me instantly if they noticed me at all, but buses didn't. Every school bus slowed when it passed me. Not enough to draw attention, just enough for me to feel seen. Their engines changed pitch, a subtle shift that set my teeth on edge. Drivers frowned at nothing. Children pressed their faces to windows, eyes tracking me until the bus turned a corner. I began to understand. Route 61B wasn't unique, it was just honest. I found the depot again on the fourth morning. I don't know why I went back. Habit, maybe, or gravity. The place looked the same. Rows of yellow buses, the smell of fuel and cold metal, but something underneath it all had changed. Or maybe I had. I walked between the parked buses, my hand brushing through solid steel without resistance. Numbers flashed past my eyes. 14A, 22C, 9D. 61B wasn't there. In its place stood an empty space, darker than the rest of the lot, like a stain that wouldn't fade. A man stood beside it, older than the thing that wore my face, older than me. His uniform was out of date, the fabric thin and worn, his cap pulled low. He looked tired in a way that went beyond exhaustion. "You held longer than most," he said. I knew better than to ask how he could see me. "What happens now?" I asked. He studied the empty space. "Now you decide if the route ends or just changes shape." "I stopped it," I said. "It left." He shook his head slowly. "No, you interrupted it. Isn't that enough?" For a while. He met my eyes. "That's always the problem. A while." I looked around the depot. "How many routes are there?" He didn't answer right away. "More every year," he said finally. The weight of that settled into me like frost. "What were you?" I asked. A humorless smile tugged at his mouth. "Attendants," he said, "before they needed drivers, before they needed witnesses. And now I make sure the buses leave on time." I followed his gaze. At the far end of the lot, a bus shuddered to life. Not yellow. Its paint was a dull gray, like old snow soaked in ash. No number marked its side. Children were already boarding. They moved wrong too smoothly, like reflections sliding across glass. Some wore backpacks, some didn't. Some were too tall, some too small. The door hissed shut. The engine growled. My chest tightened. "Someone's still on it," I said. The man nodded. "There always is." "Then why let it go?" He looked at me, really looked at me, and I understood. Because if it didn't go, something else would come to take its place. "You can walk away," he said. "Forget what you saw. Drift until there's nothing left to remember." "And the children?" "Balanced," he replied softly. "For now." The gray bus rolled toward the exit. As it passed me, every window went dark at once. I stepped forward. The man didn't stop me. I walked beside the bus as it reached the gate, matching its speed, feeling that familiar pressure in my chest again. Not command, recognition. The bus spoke, not in words, in need. "I'm not your driver," I said. The pressure eased slightly. "I'm not asking." The gate opened. Beyond it, the road shimmered, splitting into countless thin lines that twisted and overlapped like veins beneath skin. Routes without numbers, stops without signs. I saw lakes, fields, empty lots, school doors that opened onto darkness. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you remember," the bus replied, "and you stop when others don't." I thought of the boy who forgot his name, the girl with too many teeth, the child wearing my face, the people waiting by the road asking where their children had gone. I thought of the question carved into the snow, "Who watches now?" I stepped into the road. The bus slowed, not because it had to, because it chose to. "I won't drive," I said. "I won't deliver them." The bus waited. "I'll walk," I continued. "I'll watch. I'll remember. I'll tell the road no when it tries to fold." The engine idled, uncertain. "That has a cost." "I know." A long pause. Then the bus pulled ahead of me, slow as a funeral procession. I walked beside it, shoulder to steel, feeling more solid with every step. The children inside pressed close to the windows. Some looked afraid, some looked relieved. One small hand lifted and rested against the glass. I raised mine in return. The road ahead narrowed, but it didn't close. Behind us, somewhere far away, another engine started, another route waking. I kept walking, because the last stop is never empty, and someone has to stay long enough to see who gets left behind. Thank you so much for watching till the end of this story. If you enjoyed it, please like this video, share it with friends who love horror stories, and subscribe to the channel for more chilling content like this. Don't forget to comment below and tell me what you think about the story and which part scared you the most. Your support really motivates me to keep writing and sharing these stories. Stay tuned and wait for the next horror story video, because the road doesn't end here.